If you express your creativity while other people go hungry, you're probably not making the world a better place. You know, when you read something and you realize that if you read it 10 years earlier, you probably wouldn't be on the stage right now talking about art. This is a quote from Rhys Southan, whose 2014 essay in Eon magazine was a really interesting description of the incompatibility between art and what is known as effective altruism, which is a fairly recent philosophy developed to address, albeit rather implicitly, the humanitarian and utilitarian purposes of art. So I have to admit, when I first saw this quote and read the article, my conscience was pretty dislodged. I mean, effective altruism has a lot of really admirable and really inarguable components that rang true to me in a lot of ways. So as an art curator, I thought to myself, you know, have I dedicated my professional life to something that in the end often amounts to little more than privilege and narcissism and a truckload of art that I can't even convince my parents to hang, not to mention actually pay usable money for. So I'm not saying I'm now this unwavering utilitarian or that I think art with no humanitarian component is of no use to the world. So take this as my disclaimer. But I want to begin with this quote because Southan's essay not only was a really mind-expanding opportunity for me to self-analyze and to restabilize my position on art, which is something that I think all artists and gallerists and curators, musicians, writers, filmmakers should consider at some point in their careers. But I also think that it's important for people to be totally bummed out for anything to really change in the world. So before I continue, I'm going to give you a short glossary of terms in case some of these words are unfamiliar to you as they were to me not too long ago. So just bear with me as we trudge through some of these obnoxious isms together. Effective altruism is about finding the most productive ways of improving the lives of others. Humanitarianism relates to charity and an overall mindset of good-heartedness toward people everywhere. I'll be using the words utilitarian and pragmatic rather interchangeably, actually, to mean maximum practicality. And sustainability, whether it's environmental or social or economic, is the desire to ensure that our natural resources, marginalized populations, our planet, are not taken for granted in the name of capitalism. So as you can see, I mean, these terms are pretty easily connectable. The problem is that when you try to add art and expression into the mix, it gets expectedly more challenging. Contra the ever cliche, do what you love and express yourself mottos of recent decades, effective altruism leaves actually very little room for merely affective or aesthetic expressions of individuality in art. Similarly, let me show you what I think about these life mantras, because if you think about it, in reality, many people actually don't get to do what they love because they're too busy slaving away, sometimes literally, just to survive. In reality, many individuals don't have the privilege of expressing themselves because doing so might endanger them or their families. So you see, these privilege mantras are part of what have led not only to the individual creativity that Southan questions, but also to these looming post-art questions implied by effective altruism. For example, is art even worthwhile anymore? Have we replaced art yet? And in many ways, these questions really aren't that outlandish. You know, it's hard to quantify, even justify art about an artist's inner demons. It's already hard enough trying to justify art that actually raises awareness about environmental or socioeconomic issues, you know. is it all talk? Will anything actually ever really change? Sounds great on paper. Also, art is historically unsustainable. So regarding these creative processes that claim to want to save or improve the world, there's this significant absence of pragmatism that proves rather problematic. How, regardless of how interesting or provocative it is, how actually useful is another post-minimal art installation to a family with no clean water or electricity, or to a beggar on the street? So at the crux of effective altruism are humanitarianism and utilitarianism, both of which are interested in the greatest possible good for humankind. There are, however, very sensible counter-arguments to these ideas, so this kind of goes back to how I can even sleep at night having absorbed Southin's essay. For example, the way in which utilitarianism overlooks varying needs on an individual basis. There's this sort of implied acceptance of human lives as collateral damage. Even animal rights come into play when you consider the actual use of animals. And humanitarianism also has its critics. Think of the give a man a fish versus teach a man to fish maxim. So with all of these things in mind, all of this stuff really got me thinking, how are artists today really trying to reconcile these pragmatic efforts and these philanthropic efforts with art and aesthetics today? How are they holding themselves accountable to these social realities? Must aesthetics be completely abandoned for pragmatism? My research has led me to a number of artists that I believe really are trying to make a difference in the world. Artists that are working to provide both aesthetic and sustainable examples of how art really can make the world a better place through the lenses of humanitarian and utilitarian sensibilities. This is a work called Supergas by the Danish art collective Superflex. I love everything that Superflex is doing right now. So for this project, they constructed these portable biogas units that can produce enough energy for the average-sized poverty-stricken family to cook and to run a gas lamp just from energy collected from the organic waste of 2 cattle. So going back to Southin's article, this is an artwork that is actually working to feed families in less developed countries. This is another artwork called Food Forest by an art collective by the name of Artist as Family. And it's a permanent garden installation that provides food for a nearby soup kitchen and also allows homeless individuals to get their own produce and make use of this garden and learn to be more self-reliant members of society. So before I go to the last group I want to talk about, which is the Land Art Generator Initiative, I'll describe them for a minute. The Land Art Generator Initiative, or LAGI for short, is actually this really tremendous initiative that in a recent interview actually informed me that they don't even bother differentiating between their humanitarian and utilitarian endeavors, which is an idea that I actually really quite like. And so LAGI hosts these biennial competitions for sustainable public art designs, and the winners are awarded cash prizes, and all of the designs enter public domain for public art councils around the world to construct if they so choose. So this first work is called Windstock, and it basically consists of these reinforced resin poles that, as they sway in the wind, convert kinetic energy into usable electricity. And this artwork has the annual energy capacity of 20,000 megawatt hours. So to put that into perspective for you, the average American family uses approximately 10 megawatt hours per year. So this is a lot of energy powering homes just from a work of art. And I mean, we're talking the bottomless black hole of consumption that is America. So imagine what these artworks could do really in any other place in the world. To bring these ideas a little closer to home, for all of you harmonic geniuses in the room, this artwork is called Solar Sound Field, and it actually, as hot air rises up these solar chimneys, they produce both energy and musical notes. This last design is called Solar Hourglass, has the annual energy capacity of 6,000 megawatt hours, and it consists of, it's basically this like strategic arrangement of mirrors that concentrate reflected solar energy to turn water into steam and thereby power an engine. The really cool thing about this work is that actually some of the steam that's produced is released back through the neck of the hourglass, rendering the solar beam actually visible to the public. So it's pretty easy to see the utilitarian constituents of these artworks, but perhaps it's not as easy to see how they're humanitarian. However, if you consider all of the populations around the world that are negatively affected by climate change, for example, island and coastal peoples who are suffering from rising sea levels and losing their homes, crops of poor farmers who are suffering from drought and rising temperatures, it becomes easier and clearer to see why Loggy doesn't differentiate between its utilitarian and humanitarian endeavors. So after all this, again, I'm not saying that I think all artists should just give up their art practice or become completely effectively altruistic, because, again, I do see value beyond utility. But if you're wondering, how can I even begin to incorporate some of these ideas into my practice, I have a couple starting points for you. William McAskill, who's the founder of Effective Altruism, just published this book called Doing Good Better, which is a really great way to shift charity to the forefront of your mind. Also, Loggy has provided this downloadable field guide to renewable energy technologies for those of you who are as energy literate as I am. So to bring this full circle, let's revisit the quote with which we began and make a couple adjustments. If you express your creativity with sustainability and altruism in mind, you can help make the world a better place. Because the thing is, business as usual art really shouldn't be the only kind of new art out there. If we are to compensate for the often self-involved, picturesque meme that art need be nothing more than something that's kind of nice to look at, then we have to start envisioning art in new ways. And one way in which we can do this is to start holding art pragmatically accountable. Combining contemporary art aesthetics, effective altruist philosophy, and sustainable development can help art become something that is really making the world a better place. Perhaps it can be that new kind of art. And in my opinion, we are the most equipped we've ever been for such an undertaking. Thank you.